This is the voice of Bold Business Radio. You are listening to Take a Trip and Think. I am your host, Jess Dewell. Today, Keith Renninson is joining us. And before I introduce you to him, I would like to take a minute and talk about this concept of, dream. It's on my teacup today, dream. The whole world, we've got a lot of dreams. Every single person in this world has a dream. And regardless of how close, attainable, impossible, crazy it might seem, we can get there. We can take steps to get there because really, even if it's the most attainable dream, we may end up in a totally different place because of the ideas that come up along the way, because we're willing to stop, reflect, and think, and because we're willing to take a trip. Keith Renninson is a speaker, author, and motivator. He's been fired 53 times, and he did that in the first 3 years, the 36 months of selling insurance, taking 14 years to make a podium in a bike racing, and he got lost in the Himalayas for days. This gives Keith a unique perspective on building life philosophy that succeeds. As a master storyteller, Vietnam vet, and author of 3 nonfiction books, as well as 4 children's books, Keith also brings years of improv comedy to his speeches. We'll be right back, and you'll get to meet Keith right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
We're going to just start in. Let's talk about the craziness of life. One of the things that you are an expert at is tenacity. That means we just navigate life the best that we can. Where does that start, navigating life for tenacity?
I think we all have tenacity built in. I think it's a human trait that's already there. As with the other portions of my acronym of TRIP, resilience, imagination, and purpose, all humans, I think, have these traits, but they have to grow them. It's like a muscle. And I talk in my blogs and on my website often about how the tenacity muscle is one that needs exercise. And if you don't step outside your comfort zone often enough to exercise that tenacious quality, then you're going to be falling behind, both in the goals you want, the accomplishments that you want to have that will bring you to where you want to be either now or later in life. I think it's something that is there all the time. We just have to discover it. I just turned 70 in December. I'm amazed at, even at this point in time in my life, how I'm still discovering stuff. The age-old saying goes, the older I get, the dumber I get. You perceive the fact that there's so much yet to learn when you get to these ages. You suddenly start to find that there's a lot more to learn than what you thought, and you have to really knuckle down and use what you've learned already to discover them.
You just told us how old you are. I just turned 40. Now it's a pretty big deal in my world. So what would you say to somebody who's my age, 40, or somebody who is in their early 20s or late 20s and they're starting their first career about using the experience that they already have?
I'll kind of come at you from an article that was in USA Today in January, which said that the average millennial is experiencing midlife crisis at 27. Well, that's not even midlife. Now, that might be mid-career. They may have started early in a techie kind of position, or were lucky enough to get something right out of college, and they've been at it for maybe, 6 years, maybe 7 on a stretch. That's not even mid-career. Mine hit me at 48. So for those of you that are younger than me, and we kind of talked about this offline before we started, it's getting the quiet time. If you don't sit down long enough away from your phone, away from your computer, away from any other kind of technology that's in your life, and learn who you are and what you want and where you're going, that quiet time is going to help you get there. But if you don't have it, you're going to struggle with it. We are so connected now. The old AT&T thing, or Mountain Bell, one of those years ago, was reach out and touch someone. And we reach out and touch people constantly now. We're never alone. My son's 24 in June. We have this discussion a lot, and he has finally got it. He's finally learned that meditation and journaling and getting that quiet time is helping him get his job and his career launched off and doing well. He's a realtor now. property manager and doing real estate sales. He says that when he has an appointment to meet with someone for a property, that he'll now show up a half an hour early, sit in his car and meditate. He's finding that that really centers him before he goes into to do his work. And I think that's what your younger people need to learn, your generation, that if you do find that quiet time, it's going to be really valuable because you'll really learn who you are and what you're after.
Okay, I hear you. I also know that I sold my first company when I was 21. And that was after just a few years of working, starting at around 19 years old with 3 and 4 other people and building a company that was able to be sold. And I'm thinking back and I'm like, yeah, we did in our 20s. We had this time where after we were sold, we were now not only just doing things on our own as young 20s, we were part of a larger organization. So our group of 10 became part of a group of 500. And during the 7 years that I was there, became like 1,000. What you do and how you do it changes. And when I hear you talk about tenacity, and I think about the words of wisdom that I've read online and as I've heard you speak, it makes me realize that yes, there is this concept of meditation and willingness to get to know yourself, yet a lot of us have a fear around that. When do midlife crises happen? Because we can't suppress the stuff that has happened to us in our lives that we want to avoid anymore. How can we actually say, yeah, there's more I need to face and it's okay? How do we go about doing that?
I went to Nepal and got lost.
Yeah, tell us about that. Me, I just keep running and running and running.
The trip that I got lost on happened in November of 1995. I had gone to Nepal in 93 with another friend. We climbed up to the Annapurna Sanctuary and got up to almost 15,000 feet and we're really enjoying the trip. And I really enjoyed the Nepalese people. And so when I came home, I finished a book that I had been writing over the next couple of years and I published it in the fall of 95. When that was done, it was sort of anticlimactic. And I had my financial planning practice and my insurance agency was going pretty well. I started in 1975 with New York Life. And so I had been at it at that point for 20 years. And what midlife crisis does to most men is they go out and buy a Harley or a Corvette. I don't know what women do. I won't even talk about women. Men do things that are crazy and they shouldn't do.
Smart man.
And I decided I don't want a Corvette. I raced cars all during the 70s and 80s. I raced Porsches all over the country. And so I didn't really want to go back to cars. I needed something different. And I thought, well, why don't I go to Nepal but go by myself? And so I did. And on the end of the first day, I was lost. And so I was trekking an area which didn't have a lot of tourist facilities. I had to change my plans when I got to Kathmandu because they'd had a lot of snow at Everest. And I was going to climb to Everest Base Camp, which is something anybody can do. But then I couldn't get a trekking permit. So I'm in an area where I'm lost and I don't know where I'm going. And I end up having to spend the night with Nepalese people. First night this family had a little boy who'd learned to speak English. And it was very broken English. He was 6 years old and going to a UN school that was 2 valleys over from where we were at. And so he's interpreting for his mother and father. And well, I'll tell you, there was no more fatherly pride than that night, watching that father watch his son interpret between English and Nepali at 6 years old. That was something to watch. But they gave me a place to sleep and they gave me food. The place to sleep was next to a 1,200-pound water buffalo. He was a little cranky and his stomach growled all night long and I didn't get the best night's sleep. But he was warm and that's what they guaranteed me. Here I am lost in the Himalayas, trying to find out how I'm going to get to where I'm going. And I sit down each day and I meditate and I journal and I'm writing out the important words that are starting to come to me that mean something to me in my life and what I want to do when I get home. Because when I hit my midlife crisis and I wanted to leave, it was because I wasn't measuring up to what my peers were doing. I mean, I had a good practice, but some guys were making, they were hitting the multi-million-dollar round table every year. They were really producing big numbers. Well, I came from a blue-collar background. I wanted to work with blue-collar people. That was my comfort zone. That phrase is at the bottom of all my emails now. Everything you desire is outside your comfort zone. And once I got outside of it and I went back to Nepal by myself and I had to fend for myself and figure out how to get back out of where I was, you suddenly start to look at life differently. Having a multi-million-dollar practice didn't mean anything to me. All of a sudden, it was really not there for me to even be concerned with. I was just trying to make sure I had something to eat, a place to sleep, and could figure out where I was at. And I think that that's where people are in their midlife and mid-career crisis. They're trying to figure out where they're at, what they're doing, where they're going, and what do I really want? And what I wanted in my 20s, do I really want it again in my 50s? Maybe not. So I think we face different adventures in order to find the things that we really want to do. And I think we conjure up these adventures. I think we bring them to us. I think our energies oftentimes make us such that we are looking for something, and God and the universe is going to give you something to test you, and you get to figure out, okay, what is important?
A lot of ways, can't it? It can show up, I know for me, in the last few years, this whole concept of when you turn 40, all the stuff starts to come out of you that you can't keep suppressed anymore. And I'm like, seriously? I love you, family, but who are you people? What? And you find out things that everybody seems to know, but nobody actually talks about. And by the way, this happens at work too. So here I am, right? So, and I'll go back to Red Direction, turned 14 this year. So we have great staying power and longevity, and we work with clients for multi-years. And the purpose of that is because we get to grow together and discover things. And so what we find, the more we can get closer to completing each other's sentences and sometimes taking each other for granted and taking shortcuts in communication, is that it always backfires. And I say that somewhat in jest, but it's like, oh, they're going to know what I mean. And no, somebody has a bad day and they take it wrong. Oh, it's okay. We've done it this way so many times. We're just going to continue doing it that way. No, it quit working a long time ago, and it's time to think differently now. You know, lazy is not the right word. However, there's a component to laziness in there. Maybe it's a need to grasp and protect what we've already got. Maybe it's a fear of facing what's next. Maybe it's just a lack of bandwidth. I mean, there are so many things. So if those are ailing us, or we're all of a sudden, we're like, who are we and how did we do this? And what is that person who just got that award or achieved that sales goal or did that thing, took a step and started a company, or took a promotion that they weren't quite ready for, and now you're like, yeah, no, I'm not ready for it now that I'm here. I mean, we all have those things where all of a sudden we have lost our confidence. How does tenacity play into that?
Actually, it's the resilience. The acronym being TRIP, you get 4 words, so you get to play with all of them. And tenacity doesn't fit into every bucket, but resilience does. Resilience has a really unique quality. And you can almost get scientific about it because it's a cause and effect. You have something that all of a sudden hits you right between the eyes and you don't know what to do with it, and you're at an age where you don't want to start over, and yet you've got all these things that are nagging at you that you're not doing right or you'd like to do differently. And you kind of steadily decline a little bit. At first it's subtle, then it's major, then it's depression, then you're really upset and you're going, whoa, wait a minute, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
And it's because we aren't paying attention enough to really see what's going on inside our heart. And resilience has a bounce back factor that when you apply it and you actually you sit down, you get quiet, you start thinking about, all right, I'm going to hit bottom here soon, and I've got to be able to thrust myself back up and out where I want to go. Where do I want to go? All that energy that maybe I can conjure up or get some of my friends to help me with, or people, family, whatever. If I hit that point and I can take off with new energy, new ideas, new imagination, new qualities in my life that will excite me and energize me and push me forward again, I need to use that bounce so that when that happens, I can really bring myself back up to where I want to be, but light years ahead of where I was before.
How do I do that?
It's once again getting quiet, because the quietness will enable you to see where your energies want to go. And I think the energy that we all have is inherent, but we don't recognize the value of it oftentimes. You know what it's like. You find a new project, you find something that's got you so excited, and you are ready to rock and roll with it,
Yes.
you feel different. You are a different person in that moment than you were 5 minutes earlier when you were depressed. What happened? It was an idea. It was something that you were going to take that was, whoa, this is something I could hang my hat on. I could take off and run with that. Well, what could I do with that? I brainstorm and use a big window that's here in my dining room, and I use the sticky note syndrome.
I was going to say, I have stacks of sticky notes everywhere, and they are stuck to everything all the time.
Yeah, and I storyboard it.
Okay.
So I use a window or a wall, and I storyboard it. And like when I was writing my book, I had the chapters all across the walls. Every chapter had different sticky notes dropping down from it as the ideas that I wanted to make sure I made in each of those categories. And the same thing happens when you're trying to bounce back from a big dip in your life. Find the things that you want to be able that turn you on, that make you excited. I recently, even at my age, I'm still going to coaching, and I hired a new coach a couple of weeks ago. And when he was trying to help me redesign my keynote speech, he said, what really turns you on at this stage in life? Give me 3 things that would make your life so enjoyable to get on stage and talk about. He said, I want to work this angle to find your target market, because you're changing what you're speaking about, and I want you to be able to find the right target market for it. Well, it boiled down to the financial planning industry, skiing, because I ski all winter long, and bicycling, because I still race. Well, those 3 industries, once I boiled it down and looked at it, I would love to talk to the employees in those 3 industries, because I've got experience in all 3. And resilience is that way. It's a focusing, it's a narrowing, it's a bringing it down to the simple steps. What do I start small with and move along with? You can't run until you walk. You got to be able to take off in a slow fashion and then have your act organized and go from there. And resilience is that character trait that allows us to do it.
I like everything that you said. And I'm going to say right here, I don't know, because you're right. You can't run until you walk, but sometimes you walk before you crawl, or you never crawled, or you go straight from that army thing to running. So maybe there is an element of that. And what I like, though, about what you said and how it can still apply is that it doesn't matter what the steps are. It matters that there are a set of steps, and you will hit them all, even if they're not necessarily in the right order. So if you start at the end, something's going to take you back to the parts that, quote unquote, the rest of people would have started with or found in the middle, because every single step is necessary in developing that final what you're calling resilience, the ability to bounce back from something. Because one of the things that I'm hearing you say is every experience matters. Every experience matters. And then if we're skipping some, right? Like here I was a long time ago at 21, just sold a company in a whole new environment. Okay, what does that look like? Some imposter syndrome, some holy cow, what did I just do? Some, what the heck are we going to do next? Some, can we live up to what we just said we could do that got us sold in the first place, right? You've got all of these things. So I had been a manager a whole what? And I dropped out of college to do what? And here I am leading this team in a large organization that has public shareholders, right? So I had to go back, and I had to learn things in a different order. I did not get out of the learning.
No, we never do.
Right? It came back very loud and clear. So I ran. In this case, I would say I ran before I walked, but I had to go back and go, how do each of those muscles in my legs work? And am I using it the most efficiently to run the fastest, to run the most effectively, and to run the funnest?
Yes. And it's the last one that makes it all work.
Yes.
It really is. I think that the energy that comes out of the fun, which kind of leads out of resilience and into imagination, which is that childlike quality that we all have when we're little. But as we grow up, we discard it. We don't have the fun with our imagination anymore. And that's sort of sad, but that's where in my career, I became really good at brainstorming. Especially with my financial planning clients, because they all had different goals and different desires for what they wanted to do in life, during life and at retirement. And the brainstorming was the fun part. That was where the imagination got to come in. I see that you've got a picture on the wall of a sailboat. Is that a hobby, or is that a dream? Would you like to have a catamaran that was in Miami and you were going to fly down there a couple times a year and you can take off and sail into the Caribbean? Or do you want to live in Miami?
Right.
You want to go there and take your catamaran out every day. Everybody's imagination has a different energy to it. And I have friends that are really creative. They just want to pull up an easel and they want to paint all day next to a lake. Got other guys that when they hit 65, they still want to race cars. I mean, ladies that want to be able to do all kinds of different things after they break the glass ceiling like you did, that's pushed through all of those kinds of things that my generation fought for. What are you going to do that's different with your imagination and your energy when you come into that position?
There's a quote, and I will look up to find out who said this. I dream 30 minutes a day. What would you suggest to the Voice of Bold Business Radio listeners to reawaken our imagination and our childlike creativity, which is different than just general creativity?
Spend some time with kids.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, I mean, that one's pretty simple, and you don't have to have any to do this with. Yeah, you got friends and neighbors that have got kids, or there's playgrounds. Of course, you don't want to get too creepy about it, but
that's true.
Well, the day and age we're living in is so different than what I grew up in. I could go play with kids at a playground 30 years ago, and nobody would have thought a thing about it because I was just a guy having fun with kids,
Yep.
Which I do. I thoroughly love children. But today, no, it's a whole different ballgame. But your point is well taken. There are many studies that have been done that have shown that some people have cured cancer by watching funny movies 24 hours a day. There are studies that have shown that watching the humor, the imagination that it took for entertainment, that raises that an entirely different energy inside you that is a recovery energy. It's I want to get back out. I want to enjoy life. I don't want to die. And there have been people that have actually cured themselves with that kind of energy. I mean, it's too predominant in some scientific tests to shy away from. But that's what you need to be able to do with this is when you get to that place, you've got to find that childlike quality. You've got to exercise that muscle just like you do tenacity. You've got to find places for humor. Funny story, in the late 80s, my wife and I were sitting on the couch one night, and I was always saying I could act half as good or twice as good as the actors I was seeing in commercials on television. One night there was an ad for a talent agency here in town that was running a Coors Silver Bullet beer commercial and a 1-hour optical commercial talent call. It was just a cattle call for whoever wanted to show up. My wife jabbed me in the ribs and said, "Okay, buddy, put your money where your mouth is. Go on this call." Well, I got both commercials. And it started an acting career. And before I knew it, I was on stage with a comedy troupe called Comedy Sports here in town doing improv. I mean, one thing led to another, and my imagination suddenly was in hog heaven because I was on stage playing with 6 other people, doing these fabulous skits, making an audience laugh. And I'm a financial planner. Give me a break, right? So you never know where it's going to come from or how it's going to come to you, but you got to be open for it. When it arrives, you got to take the chance.
Okay, this concept of discernment. I've got to choose. I need to be the most effective. I've got to be the best I can possibly be with my time. And I'm going to start saying no to things. And I'm going to say no to things most likely logically, because that's what I have been told I need to do by everybody around me, to do the things that must launch my success forward. Whew, was that a mouthful, right? And so we think about all those things, and some of what you're talking about flies in the face of that. In fact, everything you're saying flies in the face of that. Let's just call it what it is, Keith. And by the way, we're in the same camp. So when I hear somebody who's like-minded in that sense, it's really neat. And I want concrete examples of what that means to start. Here's the deal, people. Whether you are too busy, whether you are saying no to what you think, whether you're only going after people of a certain email list size, or you're going after a client of a certain volume, whatever that is, I hear Keith saying, guys, you might be missing something that's more fun and leads to something bigger than you ever thought by putting that, I'm going to call it arbitrary, good intentioned, yet arbitrary boundary there. Default modus operandi. So let's say we have goals to meet. We have things we have to do. We're responsible for certain size of clients. We are accountable to internal stakeholders. We're accountable to the clients that we serve, whatever our role is. When we stop to think, that is counterintuitive to what we're supposed to do, which is serve and give and serve and give and be available and all this other stuff. How do you suggest that professionals of any industry, financial planning included, real estate included, sales included, marketing included, and across all industries. What is that first step to stop after deciding to do it? Okay, I'm going to do it. Now what?
Intention.
Okay, give us more.
A lot of people talk about goals and how to achieve them, but it's intention that makes it move forward. It's the intention that takes the action. Your intention is to do one thing and your heart is somewhere else. You're going to have conflict internally. And midlife crisis, mid-career crisis is going to hit, and the things you say logically aren't going to quite fit. And intention is one of those things. In fact, this is this is my intention. I'm a little guy that uses little pads, and I write down intentions all day long of things I want to accomplish. I look back at them a few days later and I start narrowing them down, and I start writing intentions that are meaningful to me. The whole thing of going out and putting myself out at risk, trying to do comedy as a financial planner.
Yeah.
I wasn't really very good at the comedy. What I was good at was the fall guy on the comedy. So I was the guy that didn't know what was going on behind my back. Well, you never know where you're going to find something that you're good at until you try.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing with Nepal. It was venturing outside my comfort zone. If you don't venture outside and have the intention of figuring out who you are and where you're going, you won't get there. And intention works so well because it's one of those inherent things inside of us that says, when you set an intention, you intend to follow through with it.
How do you write an intention?
I intend to.
Okay. And then when you have pages and pages of them, how do you do them all?
Well, they're generally part and parcel of a bigger intention.
So good. We've got this piece of the picture. And as you're writing these intentions and they're part of something bigger, we're going to pause here and talk about mindset, because everything you've been talking about is what's going on between our ears. Are we willing to take the risk? And do we perceive stopping and thinking and being creative and getting in touch with ourselves and knowing ourselves even more? How risky is that? And what do we do to get started? And maybe it's too risky to get started. How do we get right in our head to be able to recognize that the risk is not only worth it, it's not as big as we thought?
I've got a quote in my book that says that risk is a commodity of life. I've had a number of people ask me about that. They've never thought of risk in those terms. But coming out of a life insurance practice business for, I'm just now starting to think about retiring. I'm 42 years into it, and everybody looks at risk differently. We all manage it differently. Some of us won't take any risk at all, and others will just go clear to the other end of the spectrum, and they'll jump off the cliff with every other lemming that's in front of them. You have to take risk by the tail and look at it and say, this is part of what my life consists of. This is where I'm going. I don't mind taking this risk. I can see the value and the return. The ROI is going to be worth it. And you have to just dive in with your intention and say, okay, it's time. I'm going to write my intention. I'm going to put it down onto paper. I'm going to take the risk. I'm going to go do it. Sometimes it's totally absurd. I mean, racing cars, I ski raced for a while. Bicycle race at 70 years old to go out and race with 20 other guys in a peloton, which is the big group of cyclists that ride together in a road race. You're elbow to elbow at around 25 miles an hour, which doesn't sound fast in a car, but on a bike it is, especially when the wheel in front of you is 2 inches away and you've got guys all around you. Do I really want to take those risks at 70 years old? Do I want to fall and break a collarbone? And you have to weigh that. You have to look at it. What's the enjoyment? What's the excitement? What do I have when it's all done? Well, for me, it's participation, because I only placed third in one race in 14 years. It wasn't about winning for me. It was about the excitement of being in the peloton and competing. I didn't have to win to have fun. I just needed to be there. And car racing was the same way, although there I won a lot of races. But it's all about how you can take that level of risk and turn it into fun. And once it gets to a point where it's not fun anymore, then you quit. You look at something else, you find something new. And as humans, we like variety. And so that comes fairly regularly for most of us.
That's true. Even me, I seek out new things. I like to come up with new ideas. I'm the first person to throw a bazillion stickies on the wall and be ready to try them all and take action on some to find out which one is worth thinking about more. Of course, other people have other ways to go. They look at them all and go, yep, I'm just going to choose that one. And other people will look at it and be like, we've got to layer and layer and layer to get a few down because I've got to think through this to the end. And regardless of our approach, whether we like to understand the path along the way and have less risk along the way because we've thought about it, we have some concept of what to expect. So the unexpected is still unexpected, but not crazy unexpected. Then we've got the people who are like, sweet, I'm going to jump off this building, and maybe I jump far enough that I get to the next building, and then I'm going to climb like Superman. You've seen those videos where those guys and gals climb like Superman up the sides of buildings. Coolest thing ever. Whatever that skill is, it's just great. There's always going to be something to go launch forward to. And then people like me we've got to take some action. Got to take some action to see what feels right, because we get to the energy of production. We get to the energy of what to build by actually acting. And I find that a very interesting thing. And it does come from unusual places. And I love that you shared the story about being a stand-up comic, about doing improv, because it makes you a better speaker. It also makes you think on your feet a lot quicker, and it engages a different type of conversation. Tell us about that.
The one letter that's left in my acronym is P for purpose. And you're kind of starting to slide into that territory now. Purpose is different for everybody, and it's different at different times in life. Purpose when you're young and you're raising a family, it's your kids and your husband and your home. Maybe at that point in time also it's your church or your religion or your beliefs. Maybe it's a volunteer organization. When I got home from Vietnam, I did not want to waste time ever again, because it became very precious when you suddenly have it in that kind of an environment. I started looking at places where I could volunteer, and I found a real love of volunteering. It has really served me well over all of my years. American Diabetes Association, Medical Alert Foundation, and the American Cancer Society, and National Speakers Association now. There are so many places that we can give of our time. And I tell people that purpose in life is one of those things that you have to feel good about it, just like anything else. You have to feel good about what the purpose is that you're doing things for. Are you doing it for humanity? Are you doing it for yourself? Are you doing it for your next door neighbor? Are you doing it for your wife? What is the reason that you're doing things? And I think that in midlife career crisis, I was trying to figure out, was my purpose making other people a lot of money with my financial planning? Was that really what I wanted to do? I was good at it. I helped people take care of their lives, their estate planning, their financial planning, their insurance. And I felt good about all of that when I was done. But was it enough for me, for my life, for what I was trying to do for me? And that's when the trekking in other countries started coming in, and foreign travel started coming in. And my volunteering was still there, but I was getting more facets to what purpose in life was about. And I think we have to settle back for a moment and look at that mindset as well. You can be tenacious. You can have resilience in the bad times. You can think your way out of it with imagination. But if the purpose in the end doesn't serve you well, are you going to be the happy person you want to be? Because it all boils down to happiness. If you're not happy, where are you going?
How much happiness is conditioned?
Oh, big statement there, because you've got to be happy kind of thing in our lives from the beginning. But we also have the love of money. We have the happiness of the dollar. Is all of this falling into where I want it to be? Well, maybe I'm a little too addicted to the money. Maybe I'm not really getting the purpose out of it. Maybe I'm not really getting the happiness from the job anymore. And so you have to reevaluate. At 70, my happiness place is not where it used to be as much. There was a time when going around a corner in my Porsche at 110 miles an hour was about as much happiness as I could swallow, because it was just exhilarating. But what was it? I was addicted on adrenaline. It wasn't really happiness. I was an adrenaline junkie. You have to look at what is true happiness. Dennis Prager, a talk show host out of California, wrote a book called Happiness is a Serious Problem. And he's right. We don't look at happiness the way we should so that we really find happiness. Oftentimes we find addiction, or we find another person that we get happiness from rather than internal in ourselves. So there's a lot of ways to approach the conditioning of happiness and how you find what it really is for you. Big difference.
That's really interesting. And recognizing the conditioning is there. Because, by the way, that conditioning shows up in our cultures as we lead. When we show up in the roles that we have chosen, or the roles we have accepted when appointed to, whatever our situation is. The way we think about the world impact those around us. Have you ever heard, I will look this up, and the gentleman's name in the study is escaping me. It was about how people, especially so baby boomer age, because they're at the top of their career, that they were at a point where there was nowhere for them to go up. And in fact, they would rather take an exit package to have the perception of retiring at the top than to continue working because they actually enjoyed working and take a pay cut. There were two things that drive me in almost every single thing I do. The first is, will I have enough money? I grew up in a very poor family for a very long time, and my mom and my dad scraped to get out of debt by the time I was a teenager, raising 3 kids on, well, you know how that kind of stuff goes. It just happens to be the way that it was. The other piece was security. So in my family, even though it was never said out loud, I always had shoes, I always had clothes, I always had food on the table. There was still this scarcity of money that was prevalent between the lines. And both of those things drive me. I know what that's like. And I also know that there's a fear of not having enough, and knowing that right around the corner and one potential disaster could do that. And that actually drives me differently. It sometimes gets in the way of the choices that I make. And we all have that stuff. We all have our own story. We all have our own things like that. Knowing we have that and being able to even recognize it, and knowing that our happiness doesn't have to be driven by our conditioned responses from the experiences that we had at the earliest of ages that we may not even remember, is not necessarily that it's not serving us, more like, how can we do this more? How could we make this different for somebody else? Because now what have we done? We've taken this thing that we could face and evaluate and go to therapy for and all this other stuff, journal about, and come to a conclusion and be able to transform it that way. We could also then maybe take a different route, do those things, and by being of service to others in a different way, we can transform that to help somebody else not have that same thing driving them, and remove somebody else's conditioning to get there sooner in their lifetime.
No, definitely. I think passing along the lessons that we learned from the struggles of our early lives with watching our parents or even watching ourselves, you suddenly have a different outlook and mindset, as you put it earlier, where if I can get to a place where I can be wealthy enough, I can actually hire other people to work, and therefore I'm helping lift them up as well. And I think that's where an awful lot of us came from and looked to. At one point in time, I had 4 people in my office. Those were salaries that I was paying that I didn't have to. I didn't have to grow that big. I didn't have to hire all those people. But even now, with my speaking business, I'm looking possibly to hire somebody to help make my calls and take care of some of the things that I need to have done. It's elevating others through our own efforts that makes you feel good. So there's a level of happiness that comes that's totally outside all the other things that we've been talking about. It's raising others up. Happiness floats all boats, as they say. It's that kind of thing that we all kind of start to look for when we are doing the self-examination. When we're reading the books about spirituality, when we're trying to find out what is it in me that makes me do the things I do, and how can I make it better? How can I make it grow and involve other people and help them grow as well? Those are the kinds of things that start to come, I think, when you take that self-examination road. It serves you well.
Is that the result of the intention? I know we started this section of the conversation about intention. Is that the result of our intentions?
I think it is, yes. It is for me. I think it's different for everybody. We all have different intentions and different results and outcomes that we're after, but I think it is for me.
Even though we might be out for something different, realistically, we have the outcomes we want and we measure to those. We also have the other outcomes that we never thought of that come by that. And I would say, absolutely, Keith, yes, absolutely. It doesn't matter what your metrics are. Get those, and you still get to happiness lift all boats, as you said. Okay. All right. That meaningful intention and writing them down and seeing the arc of things. Now, you're a writer, and I know writing, like physically, you showed some notes, actual writing on a piece of paper compared to typing on a keyboard uses a different part of our brain. And this is something that my son is learning in school. So you wanted to say something, and I want to let you.
I carry legal pads with me everywhere I go, big or small, depending on where I'm going. The chemistry that takes place between the mind and the hand is different on paper, as you said, than it is with a keyboard. When I write a blog, I never put it on paper. I sit down and I just open up the creativity and I put one sentence down and then I let it flow from there. And I don't rarely even look at grammar or punctuation or anything. I'm just letting it go out the end of my fingers. But when I'm trying to do planning and I'm doing my intentions, it's all on paper. Because
this is just for today's work, okay? Just for this show, I totally understand. You are talking to a writer.
Also that thing of when I get to cross stuff off, when I've got the list going and I get to cross things off, I get that buzz of, whoa, dude, you're doing all right. You crossed them off. You're talking today, you know?
Everybody who knows the show is going to go, yeah, Jessica, of course you're going to say that. I can't escape this particular bait. I hate to-do lists and I don't cross things off. Once I get too big of a to-do list, I immediately am like, uh-oh, this is a to-do list. And I crumple it up and I throw it away. And then I go back to what are the big things that we're working on and what do I owe people today? Because if I can't get it done today, I'll have to think about it tomorrow because I don't want to be planning out too many days in a row.
I know.
I think it's great that you feel good when you check things off a list.
When I retired from my insurance practice the first time in 2002, I went back to college and I took creative writing and philosophy class. What I discovered from the guy that was the instructor for the creative writing, the first class I took, was every writer has a process.
Yes.
My cup of coffee goes here, my stack of pens go over here, you know, the computer's in the middle, I've got my pad over here. We have a process, and when that process works, our creativity flows better. My process, ironically, was sitting at a Barnes & Noble Starbucks. Because being surrounded with books and people walking, I would get ideas just watching people's habits and their behavior. You know, women with children, elderly men on a cane, you know, you see the things, you start to take it in and suddenly the ideas flourish and out it comes. And I could sit there for hours putting stuff down when I was writing the books before Tenacity. And then suddenly I had a book, or it was a newspaper article, or it was a magazine article. Didn't make any difference. That's my process. Was I needed stimulation because sitting at home, because I'm a solopreneur, I'm sitting in my dining room right now. You can see behind me. You know, this is where I work all day long right now. I have an office upstairs, but it got too cluttered. So I moved downstairs and now it's cluttered. But I would pack up and I would go to Barnes & Noble. And I think we all have to find that place where that process functions well and that we feel good and that the creativity flows.
What makes it bold to take a trip and think?
That was back in my evaluation of risk. Everybody told me it was crazy to go to Nepal by myself. And I thought, no, what's crazy is staying in the rut that I'm in. I've got to think my way out of it. I thought I was going to be hiking each day from one tea house to the next, like it was when I went to the Annapurna Sanctuary. And I'd have food and I'd have lodging at the end of each day. And then when I get to the place where I ended up going towards a mountain called Kanchenjunga, there was none of that. And there was no signs on the trail. There was nothing. I was in jungle for the first day till I climbed above it. And every time I came to a Y in the path, I had to choose which way do I go. Well, I tried to decide always to go up and towards the direction on my compass that was where this town was I was trying to get to. That kind of choice, that kind of place that you reach in life sometimes is you have no choice. You have to get away from what you're in, up to your elbows in, that's causing you not to move forward, that's holding you back, that you're unsatisfied with. You've got to take that choice of, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of Dodge. I got to go someplace different where I can make myself see who I am and write each day and meditate each day. And when I got lost, I got forced into doing it because I had no choice. I had to try and keep my chaos under control because I took no food with me. I thought there was going to be tea houses each day. I had a case of Cliff Bars. I had, 12 Cliff Bars. That's all I had. And so at the end of each day, I had to find a place to spend the night. I had to find a place where I was going to find food. This was many years ago, and so there wasn't water filtration systems back then. We put iodine tablets into the water to purify it. And I still got sick. And so that started to happen on my third day. I'm getting sick from the water. I've got 23 blisters on my feet because I'm wearing boots that are made for high altitude and I'm at low altitude. There was so many factors that made me focus so narrow on just survival and myself that everything became clear. And that's kind of the last point of all of my acronym talk is that Clarity comes with these 4 steps. When you are tenacious and you bounce back from problems and you allow your imagination to work and you find your purpose, the last piece to the puzzle is clarity. And when you've got clarity, you've got the tiger by the tail. You can really dial in what you want because you suddenly are so clear on your intentions and where you're going and how you're going to get there that life becomes much more enjoyable again. And you don't have to be in the chaos and the noise. You can just think your way through it.
All right, you heard it here. We talked about all kinds of things. We talked about tenacity. We talked about resilience. We talked about intention. We talked about purpose. By the way, that's TRIP, trip, take a trip and think. We also talked about the importance of reflection and different kinds of reflection. If you look back in the program, we had the reflection of, are we doing what we want? We have the reflection of what is coming up for us now. We have the reflection of, are we being called someplace else? And how does that fit in? So when we consider all of this, then we consider it in light of leadership and leading. It's really important because sometimes leading, we're in a role, whatever role we're in, that there are circumstances outside of what we might like. Even me, the leader of my business, I find myself in circumstances I don't like. Not because of things, a change in the market, not because the people that I surround myself with and I have chosen and have accepted to be part of the Red Direction team, but because they're not going the way I thought they would go. And here's the thing. Just because they're not going the way I thought they would go doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's out of line or I'm not getting what I want. It could mean the exact opposite. And the conversation that I had with Keith today says that more than anything. The journey may be unclear regardless of the planning that we do. Pretty cool. And how does that relate to leadership? Indirectly, we are more solid facing ambiguity, unknowns, and unforeseen problems that crop up along the way. You're going to find all the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P144. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 144. You can also search the site for Take a Trip and Think. Rate this program, share your comments, and make sure that you're including your ideas. What are your intentions? How have you bounced back in a resilient way? What is the lesson or lessons that you've learned from the experiences that you've had that build your tenacity? Because it's through our sharing, it's through our conversation that defines what it means to be a leader today. It begins with us. So let's stop and take a trip and think.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.